Boss humiliates elderly man in office. Thinking he was a beggar, but he was the real owner. Jennifer Mitchell took a deep breath before entering the most important meeting room of her career. The foreign investors had been waiting for months for this meeting, and she knew everything depended on the next few minutes to secure the biggest contract in the company's history. That's when she saw an elderly man in dirty clothes mopping the floor right in front of the main entrance. His grey hair was messy, his overalls stained with grease, and he moved slowly, focused on cleaning. The sight instantly enraged her. "What is this beggar doing inside here?" she shouted, grabbing a bucket of cold water from the hallway. "Get out of here immediately!" Before anyone could intervene, Jennifer poured all the water over the man, who was left soaked and trembling. The cold liquid ran down his wrinkled face as he looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "How dare you enter my company like this?" she continued, ignoring the shocked looks from the investors who had witnessed everything. "Security! Get this man out of here now!" The elderly man didn't say a word. He just picked up his cleaning supplies with dignity, wiped his face with his wet sleeve, and walked toward the exit. But before leaving, he stopped and looked directly into Jennifer's eyes. There was no anger in his gaze, only a deep sadness that unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. "Sorry for the inconvenience, gentlemen," she told the investors, trying to regain her composure. "Sometimes beggars manage to bypass our security, but this won't happen again." The leader of the foreign delegation, a middle-aged man with a British accent, looked at her with disapproval. "Madam, I've never witnessed such cruelty against a defenseless worker," he said, adjusting his glasses. "This kind of behavior makes us seriously question whether we want to do business with your company." "Worker?" Jennifer laughed nervously. "That man clearly doesn't belong here. He was obviously lost or trying to take advantage of the situation." "He was working, ma'am," another investor intervened. "We clearly saw that he was cleaning the floor professionally, and you treated him like an animal." The meeting that was supposed to last 3 hours ended in 15 minutes. The investors left visibly disturbed, promising to re-evaluate the entire business proposal. Jennifer was left alone in the room, feeling that something had gone drastically wrong, but still convinced she had acted correctly. The next day, she arrived early at the office, determined to forget the episode and focus on recovering the deal. But right at the reception, she found Sharon, the company's longest-serving employee, with a worried expression. "Jennifer, I need to talk to you about what happened yesterday," Sharon said, lowering her voice. "That gentleman that you soaked, he wasn't a beggar. He's Mr. Richard from the outsourced cleaning team." Jennifer's stomach tightened slightly, but she tried to maintain her posture. So what? He shouldn't have been working at that time, especially not in that area. It was an understandable mix-up. Understandable? Sharon looked at her in disbelief. "Jennifer, he's worked here for over 40 years. He knows every corner of this company better than any of us, and you publicly humiliated him as if he were an intruder." 40 years? Jennifer tried to process the information. "That's impossible. I've never seen him before." "Because you've never paid attention to the people who actually make this company work," Sharon replied with unusual harshness. "Mr. Richard has always worked the early morning shift and sometimes stays late to finish special jobs. Yesterday he was doing an extra cleaning precisely, so everything would be perfect for her meeting." The irony of the situation hit Jennifer like a punch in the stomach, but her rational mind refused to fully accept the responsibility. "Well, if he really works here, he should wear a proper uniform and identify himself appropriately," she said, searching for justifications. "How was I supposed to know?" "He was wearing a uniform, Jennifer," Sharon sighed. "The cleaning company's overalls, the same one he's worn for decades. The problem is, you never cared to know the people who work for you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Over the following days, Jennifer tried to downplay the incident, convincing herself it had just been a minor misunderstanding. But the company began buzzing with comments about what happened. Employees whispered in the hallways, and she could feel the judgmental stares whenever she passed by. That's when Rachel from reception approached her with a serious expression. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something important," said the young receptionist, clearly nervous. "Some employees filmed what happened yesterday. The video is circulating internally." Jennifer's blood ran cold in her veins. "What do you mean they filmed? Who had the audacity to film a private meeting?" "Not the meeting," Rachel quickly explained. "Just the part in the hallway when you threw the water at Mr. Richard. Brian from finance was passing by and recorded it with his phone. He said it was instinctive, that he was shocked by the scene. Where is this video now?" Jennifer's voice came out louder than she intended. "It's making the rounds in internal WhatsApp groups. Most people are quite outraged." Jennifer felt anger explode in her chest. She immediately called a general meeting and, in front of all employees, made a clear threat. "If anyone shares any video about internal company matters, whether inside or outside the workplace, they will be immediately fired," she declared, staring at every employee present. "This is a serious violation of our corporate privacy policy." The silence that followed was tense and heavy. Jennifer could feel that instead of solving the problem, she had only increased the tension in the environment. Employees left the meeting in small groups, whispering among themselves with even more intensity. That afternoon, she decided to discreetly observe this Richard everyone was talking about. She discovered he always arrived at 5 in the morning and left after 8 at night. He worked with a methodicalness that was impressive, knowing exactly where every cleaning product was, every piece of equipment, every detail of the infrastructure. What bothered her most was how the other employees treated him, not with pity or condescension, but with genuine respect. He greeted everyone by name, asked about their families, remembered birthdays and important dates. It was as if he were the invisible social heart of the company. 1 week after the incident, Jennifer received the call she feared. Executive Director Stephen Anderson wanted to see her immediately in his office. "Jennifer, the foreign investors have definitively cancelled the contract," Stephen said without preamble. "They cited serious concerns about our company's corporate culture." "But sir, it was just a misunderstanding," she tried to defend herself. "An employee was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and You publicly humiliated a man over 60 years old in front of potential international partners," Stephen interrupted her. "They said any company that treats its employees this way isn't trustworthy for long-term partnerships. I was protecting the company's image. How could I have known that?" "Jennifer, that's not the point," Stephen sighed heavily. "The point is, you acted with a cruelty that shocked people who didn't even know us. That says a lot about our corporate character." "So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you seriously reflect on your leadership methods, and that you find a way to repair the damage caused, both externally and internally." Jennifer left Stephen's room with a bitter taste in her mouth. For the first time in years, she felt her job might be threatened. But instead of reflection, her mind turned to finding someone to blame. And the main culprit in her distorted perception was Richard himself. If he had properly identified himself, none of this would have happened, she thought. If he hadn't shown up at that specific moment, everything would have gone smoothly. Driven by this twisted logic, Jennifer decided to investigate Richard's life more deeply. She wanted to find something that would justify her attitude, some problem in his background that proved she had acted correctly by instinct. She started by discreetly talking to older employees. She sought out Mrs. Dorothy, one of the secretaries who has worked at the company for over 20 years. "Mrs. Dorothy, do you know Mr. Richard from cleaning well?" Jennifer asked casually. "Yes, I do, dear," Dorothy replied with a warm smile. "He's one of the most upright people I've ever known." "Why do you ask?" "Just curiosity. He seems different from the other cleaning staff." "Different how?" "I can't explain. More involved, perhaps." Dorothy laughed softly. "Oh, that's because he's not just a cleaning employee. Actually, he knows this company better than any of us. He was already here when I started 20 years ago, and back then people already said he was a kind of guardian of the company's history." "Guardian of the history? He's witnessed all the changes, all the renovations, all the presidents who've passed through here. When someone needs to know something about the company's past, he's the first person they ask." "And why was he never promoted?" Dorothy thought for a moment before answering. "You know, Jennifer, I never stopped to think about that. I think he likes what he does. Or maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe he has his reasons for preferring to stay behind the scenes." This conversation left Jennifer even more intrigued. She sought out David, the maintenance supervisor, who had worked at the company for 15 years. "David, I need to know more about how the outsourced cleaning team operates, especially about an employee named Richard." David immediately smiled. "Mr. Richard? He's a legend around here. Why the interest?" "Legend? How?" "Well, he knows every screw, every pipe, every wire in this building. When we have some technical problem we can't solve, we always consult him first. He saved me more times than I can count." "But how would a cleaning employee know about technical issues?" "Good question." David scratched his head. "He always says he learned by observing over the years, but his knowledge goes far beyond simple observation. It's as if he had participated in building this place." These conversations, instead of providing the justifications Jennifer was looking for, only increased her curiosity and, paradoxically, her irritation. It was as if everyone was conspiring to make the man seem more important than he really was. One afternoon, when she stayed late at the office to catch up on work, Jennifer heard voices coming from the records room. Curious, she went to investigate and found Richard organizing old documents with meticulous precision. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to sound authoritative. Richard looked up calmly, showing no surprise or fear. "Good evening, Miss Jennifer. I'm cataloging documents that can be discarded and others that should be digitized. It's a task I do from time to time." "Who authorized this?" "No one, specifically. It's something I've always done to help the company keep its files organized." "And why do you do this without extra pay?" Richard smiled gently. "Because I like to see the company running well. Every organized document, every improved process, every small contribution makes a difference in the final outcome." Jennifer looked at the documents he was sorting. His organization was impressive, with detailed labels and classifications that demonstrated a deep knowledge of the corporate structure. "How do you know which documents are important?" 43 years teach you a lot about a company," he replied simply. "I've lived through all the changes, all the mergers, all the crises. I know which papers are crucial and which are redundant." 43 years? Jennifer couldn't hide her surprise. "Yes, I started very young, when this building didn't even exist yet. The company operated in a small rented house in downtown New York." For the first time, Jennifer felt a twinge of genuine curiosity instead of defensive irritation. "And what was it like working for the company back then?" Richard's eyes sparkled with nostalgia. "It was a family. We were few. Everyone knew each other. Everyone helped each other. We worked hard, but there was a purpose, a passion in everything we did. And now? Now it's different," he said without bitterness, just with the neutrality of someone stating a fact. "Bigger, more efficient, more profitable. But we lost a bit of our soul along the way." Jennifer felt strangely uncomfortable with these words. There was something in the serene way he spoke that made her question things she had never questioned before. "Well, I won't bother you anymore," she said abruptly. "Just be careful not to mess with anything important." "Don't worry," Richard smiled again. "I know exactly what I can and cannot touch." The following weekend, Jennifer decided to go to the office to get ahead on some projects. The building was practically empty, with only minimal security. When she passed by the 10th floor, she heard voices coming from one of the training rooms. Curious, she peeked through the door window and was completely surprised by what she saw. Richard was in front of a small group of new cleaning staff, explaining in detail about organization techniques and special care with expensive equipment. "This area here is where the servers are located," he explained, pointing to an improvised floor plan. "The temperature needs to be constant, so when you clean, never block the air vents for more than a few seconds. And if an accident happens?" asked one of the young employees. "First, don't panic. Second, call me immediately, even if it's the middle of the night. Third, never try to solve problems with equipment you're not familiar with on your own." "How do you know so much about these things?" asked a new employee. Richard laughed softly. Because I witnessed the installation of every system in this building. I saw the mistakes that cost dearly. I saw the solutions that worked. Experience is something you don't learn from manuals. Jennifer watched for almost an hour, fascinated by the natural authority Richard exerted over the younger employees. They listened to him with attention and respect, asking smart questions and jotting down his tips. It wasn't just technical knowledge he was sharing, but also a work philosophy based on care, attention to detail, and pride in what he did. It was exactly the kind of leadership she had always tried to exercise, but had never managed so naturally and spontaneously. The following Monday, an unexpected crisis tested the entire team's competence. The building's climate control system completely broke down during a heat wave, and specialized technicians from 3 different companies couldn't locate the problem. Jennifer was desperate, watching computers overheat and employees starting to feel sick, when she saw Richard discreetly approach the maintenance supervisor. "David," he said quietly, "have they checked the main valve in the basement?" "Which valve?" David seemed confused. "The one that controls the overall flow to the upper floors. It's hidden behind the backup generator. Sometimes it gets clogged with sediment and causes exactly this kind of problem." David immediately called the technicians, and following Richard's directions, they found exactly the problem he had suggested. Within 15 minutes, the entire system was working again. Jennifer witnessed the whole scene, impressed not only with Richard's technical knowledge, but with the humility with which he offered the solution. He didn't want credit, didn't insist on being noticed, just solved the problem and returned to his work. When the technicians asked how he knew about that specific valve, Richard simply smiled and said, "I followed the construction of this building from the first brick. There's nothing here I don't know." For the first time since the water incident, Jennifer felt a twinge of genuine curiosity about Richard's past. She began to realize there was much more to him than she had initially imagined. A few weeks later, the company underwent a rigorous quality and safety audit. The auditors wanted to verify all procedures, including those for cleaning and building maintenance. When it was Richard's turn to be interviewed, Jennifer decided to discreetly observe the session. What she saw left her completely speechless. Richard answered each of the auditor's questions with impressive precision. He knew every safety regulation, every emergency procedure, every technical specification of the building systems. More than that, he could explain the history of every change, the reasons behind each renovation, the lessons learned from past problems. "Mr. Richard," said the lead auditor, "in 40 years of work, I've rarely encountered someone with such comprehensive knowledge of a facility. You should be giving consultations, not doing cleaning." "Every job has its dignity," Richard replied simply, "and I've found my purpose in taking care of this company." The auditors left the meeting visibly impressed. In the final report, they specifically praised Richard's competence and dedication, using words like exceptional institutional knowledge and valuable asset to the organization. Jennifer read the report 3 times, trying to process the fact that the man she had publicly humiliated was considered one of the company's most competent employees by impartial external professionals. The situation became even more intriguing when a new CEO took over the company. Jonathan Parker, an experienced executive brought in from a multinational, began holding individual meetings with long-time employees to better understand the corporate culture. When it was Richard's turn, Jennifer expected a standard 15-minute meeting. Instead, the conversation stretched for over 3 hours, and both left the room smiling like old friends. Employees commented that they had never seen the new director so interested and engaged in an initial conversation. Jennifer tried to find out what had been discussed, but both Jonathan and Richard maintained absolute discretion about the meeting's content. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. A few days later, Jonathan announced significant changes to the company's structure, including the creation of a Corporate Culture Preservation Committee, composed of longtime employees who knew the organization's history deeply. To everyone's surprise, Richard was appointed as the committee's coordinator, a position that, while not officially changing his job title, gave him direct influence over the company's strategic decisions. During the company's year-end party, Jennifer watched fascinated as Richard interacted naturally with directors from other branches who had come for the event. Everyone seemed to know him and showed genuine respect for his opinions. Their director from Chicago commented loudly enough for her to hear, "Whenever we're planning major renovations, we consult Richard first. He knows every structural detail and can predict problems that even our engineers can't imagine." Another director from Miami added, "It's impressive how he remembers solutions that worked in similar situations decades ago. It's like having a human database of the company." Jennifer began to realize there was a network of relationships and influence she had never been part of, despite her hierarchical position. Richard was respected not for his formal position, but for his actual competence and genuine dedication. The most impactful revelation came a few months later, during a document crisis that almost resulted in $1 million fine for the company. Crucial documents for a legal case had disappeared from the official archives, and lawyers were desperate. It was Richard who located complete copies of all the papers in secondary archives that only he knew existed. Not only did he save the company from massive legal troubles, but he also provided additional documents that strengthened the organization's legal position. Jonathan made sure to thank Richard publicly in a general meeting, highlighting how his institutional knowledge had saved the company from enormous losses. "This is the kind of employee every company should value," Jonathan told everyone present. "Knowledge, dedication, and loyalty that go far beyond any job description." Jennifer watched Richard's public recognition with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was beginning to genuinely admire his competence and dedication. On the other, she felt increasingly embarrassed about her own past attitude. The internal conflict reached its peak during a small fire that started in an equipment room. While everyone followed basic evacuation protocols, Richard demonstrated that he knew every emergency route in the building better than the security guards themselves. He calmly and efficiently guided groups of employees, ensuring everyone got out safely. During the evacuation, Jennifer got lost in the smoke-filled hallways, and it was precisely Richard who guided her to the exit. "This way, Mrs. Jennifer," he said gently, holding her arm to guide her. "This staircase is the closest and safest." The irony of the situation struck her like lightning. The man she had publicly humiliated was now literally saving her. She murmured an embarrassed thank you, but Richard just smiled and continued helping other employees. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. The image of Richard soaked and trembling after receiving the ice water alternated with the image of him saving her from the fire. The contradiction between her actions and his true character began to eat away at her certainties. Driven by a curiosity she could no longer ignore, Jennifer decided to investigate Richard's employment records more deeply. Using her executive clearance, she accessed human resources files containing his complete history. What she discovered completely shocked her. Richard had indeed worked at the company for 43 years, but he had started at 18 as a general assistant, not as a cleaning staff. In the early years, his records showed various roles: administrative assistant, maintenance helper, technical support. Even more intriguing were the archived recommendation letters written by executive directors from past decades. All praised his exceptional dedication, comprehensive knowledge, and suggested promotions that apparently never materialized. A note from 1995, made by the company's president at the time, said, "Richard knows this company like no one else. He should be consulted on all important decisions related to infrastructure and operations." Another note from 2003, "Exemplary employee. His experience and knowledge are invaluable. I strongly recommend he be included in the company's advisory board." Why were these recommendations never followed? Why was someone with so much praise and recognition working as an outsourced cleaning staff? The answer began to emerge when Jennifer found records of a major corporate restructuring that occurred in 2008. The company had been sold to a larger business group, and many long-time employees were relocated or retired early. Richard's name appeared on a list of employees who chose to remain in operational roles instead of accepting the voluntary severance package. But there were no details about the specific circumstances of this choice. Intrigued, Jennifer sought out Dorothy, one of the few employees who had been with the company during the 2008 transition. Mrs. Dorothy, do you remember the 2008 restructuring? Specifically, what happened to long-time employees like Mr. Richard? Dorothy sighed deeply. It was a very difficult time, Jennifer. Many good people lost their jobs. Mr. Richard, well, he could have left with a generous severance, but he chose to stay. Why would he do that? Love for the company, I think. He always said he couldn't imagine his life away from here. So when the new owners offered him the possibility to continue as an outsourced employee, he accepted. But why as cleaning staff? He had qualifications for much more. The new managers wanted fresh blood in technical and administrative positions. Long-time employees were seen as resistant to change, so the only positions available for those who wanted to stay were operational. And he accepted this demotion without complaining? Without complaining at all. He said what mattered was continuing to contribute, not the job title. This conversation revealed a dimension of Richard's character that left Jennifer deeply troubled. He had sacrificed status, salary, and recognition just to stay in the company he loved, and she had treated him like an unwanted intruder. Guilt began to consume her intensely. Every time she saw Richard working with dignity and competence, she remembered the ice-cold water running down his face. The image haunted her during the day and kept her awake at night. Jennifer tried to approach him a few times to apologize, but whenever she prepared to speak, shame paralyzed her. What could she say? How to apologize for such a public and cruel humiliation? The situation became even more complicated during a delicate negotiation with safety equipment suppliers. The contract involved millions of dollars and required specific technical knowledge about the building's infrastructure. To everyone's surprise, Jonathan asked Richard to join the meeting as a technical consultant. His presence at the negotiation table initially caused surprise among the suppliers, who expected to deal only with executives. But when Richard began to speak, demonstrating detailed knowledge about every system, every specification, every technical need of the company, the suppliers were impressed. His suggestions were so precise that they resulted in savings of nearly 300,000 reais in the final contract. Jennifer watched the meeting in silence, observing how Richard naturally moved between complex technical knowledge and sophisticated financial negotiations. It was obvious he had participated in many similar meetings in the past, probably in much higher positions. The final revelation came unexpectedly during a casual conversation between Jonathan and another director that Jennifer overheard by chance. "Jonathan, can I ask you something? Why do you pay so much attention to the cleaning staff's opinions?" "Not that I disagree, but it's unusual to see an executive consulting someone in that position." Jonathan laughed. "David, you don't know who Richard is, do you? I know he's a very competent and experienced employee, but he's the original founder of this company." Jennifer felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She hid behind a column to keep listening, her heart pounding uncontrollably. "Founder? What do you mean?" David seemed as shocked as she felt. Richard created this company in 1982, when he was only 22 years old. He started in a garage in New York, built everything from scratch. For 26 years, he was the president and majority shareholder. But then, why does he... In 2008, during the global economic crisis, the company went through serious difficulties. Richard sold his majority stake to save all the employees' jobs. He could have closed the company and kept what was left for himself, but he chose to sacrifice his position to protect the people who worked for him. Jennifer leaned against the wall, feeling dizzy. The puzzle pieces were falling into place in a devastating way. And why did he keep working here after selling? Because this company is his life. He couldn't imagine himself doing anything else, so when the new owners offered him the possibility to stay in any operational position, he accepted. He said he'd rather clean the floors of the company he created than work anywhere else. Incredible. And do the other employees know this? Some of the older ones know, but he asks for discretion. He doesn't want to be treated differently because of the past. He wants to be judged by the work he does today, not by what he was yesterday. David was silent for a moment before asking, "And you? How did you find out?" He told me himself during our first conversation. He wanted me to know the true story of the company before implementing any changes. That's why I consult him on all important decisions. There's no one in the world who understands this organization better. The conversation continued, but Jennifer could no longer listen. Her mind was completely consumed by the devastating revelation. She had publicly humiliated the man who created the company where she worked. She had thrown ice water on the founder of the organization that provided her livelihood. The magnitude of the irony was overwhelming. While she considered herself important and indispensable, the true creator of everything worked silently, lovingly caring for every detail of the company he had built with his own hands. Jennifer spent the following days in a state of emotional shock. She couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't stop thinking about the expression in Richard's eyes when the ice water hit him. Now she perfectly understood that deep sadness she had seen in his gaze. It wasn't the sadness of a humiliated employee, but the sadness of a father seeing a child treat his legacy with contempt and cruelty. Guilt had become almost physical, a constant ache in her chest that stayed with her every minute of every day. She had to do something, had to find a way to fix the unfixable. But how do you apologize for humiliating the man who built everything? How do you atone for such injustice? Words seemed completely inadequate in the face of the enormity of her mistake. Jennifer began observing Richard even more closely, trying to understand how someone could maintain such dignity and serenity after losing everything and still being treated with contempt. Every gesture, every word, every action of his demonstrated a greatness of spirit she had never encountered before. Seeing him working lovingly in the same hallways where he had built his business dreams moved her deeply. He cared for every detail as if he were still the owner, tenderly protecting the legacy he had been forced to hand over. One morning, Jennifer witnessed a scene that particularly touched her. A young employee had made a serious mistake that could result in his dismissal. The young man was desperate, shaking with nerves when Richard approached. Instead of reprimands or judgment, Richard placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and said in a fatherly voice, "Calm down, son. We all make mistakes. What's important is to learn and grow from them. I'll help you sort this out the best way possible." Over the next hour, Richard guided the young man on how to correct the problem, shared his own experiences of making similar mistakes, and even intervened with supervisors to prevent unnecessary punishment. The wisdom and compassion he showed in that moment contrasted brutally with the cruelty Jennifer had shown him. It was as if she were the youngest and most inexperienced person in that company, while he, despite his age and humble position, was the true leader and mentor. That afternoon, Jennifer made a decision that surprised even herself. She resigned from her executive position. The decision shocked everyone at the company, especially since she offered no detailed explanation. She simply said she wanted to reassess priorities and seek a more meaningful purpose in work. Jonathan tried to dissuade her, offering better conditions, more responsibilities, even a promotion, but Jennifer was determined. She asked to be reassigned as an assistant in a different department, wanting to learn about the company the same way Richard had decades ago. "I want to truly understand how this company works," she explained to Jonathan. "I want to know every process, every person, every detail. I want to learn to truly value work." The decision sparked intense speculation among the employees. Some thought she had gone mad. Others suspected serious personal problems. But Jennifer stood firm in her choice, though she couldn't fully explain all her motivations even to herself. Richard heard about the change through general talk, but showed no special reaction. He continued his work as usual, treating Jennifer with the same respectful courtesy he showed all employees. It was only a few weeks later, when Jennifer was working late organizing files in her new role, that Richard sought her out personally. "Miss Jennifer," he said softly, "may I speak with you for a few minutes?" Jennifer felt her heart race. It was the first one-on-one conversation between them since the water incident. "Of course, Mr. Richard." He pulled up a chair and sat beside her, creating an atmosphere of conversation between equals that she had never experienced with him. "I heard you left your executive position by choice. I hope it wasn't because of the misunderstanding we had a few months ago. The euphemism misunderstanding to describe the humiliation she had inflicted on him made her feel even more ashamed. Actually, it was exactly because of that, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. I discovered things about you, about your story, that made me deeply question who I am and how I've been treating people. Richard studied her with gentle, wise eyes. And what things did you discover? That you are the founder of this company, that you sacrificed everything to save other people's jobs, that you could be anywhere in the world, but chose to stay here, working with humility and dignity. And that disturbed you. It disturbed me because I realized I spent years thinking I was important and indispensable, when in fact I understood nothing about the real value of work. I knew nothing about true dedication, about love for what one does. Richard smiled with a mixture of melancholy and understanding. Jennifer, may I call you Jennifer? She nodded, moved. Jennifer, during 43 years in this company, I've seen many people come through here. I've seen brilliant executives who lost their humanity. I've seen simple employees who had profound wisdom. I've learned that a person's value isn't measured by the position they hold, but by the positive impact they make on others' lives. But I made a terrible impact on your life. How can you be here, talking to me with such kindness? Because you're here, talking to me with such humility, he replied simply. Because you chose to leave an important position to learn about real work. That shows you have a heart capable of growth. Tears began to stream down Jennifer's face. Mr. Richard, I can't stop remembering that cold water running down your face. I can't stop hating myself for what I did. Then stop, he said with paternal firmness. Hate builds nothing, Jennifer. Neither hatred for others nor hatred for yourself. Use this experience to become a better person, not to destroy yourself. How can I become a better person after doing something so cruel? By learning, growing, contributing positively to the lives of people around you, showing through actions that you've truly changed. They talked for over 2 hours that night. Richard shared stories about the company's founding, about the challenges faced, about the philosophy that had always guided his decisions. He spoke about how he'd learned that true success isn't measured in money or power, but in how much you contribute to others' well-being. When I created this company, he said, my greatest ambition was to create a place where people felt valued and could grow, where work had purpose and meaning. I lost controlling interest, but I didn't lose that passion. And that's why you remain here, even in a position that's far below your qualifications. It's not below any qualifications, he corrected gently. All honest work has dignity, and I'd rather clean with love the company I created than run with indifference any other business. This conversation marked the beginning of a profound transformation in Jennifer's life. During the following months, working in her new position, she began to learn about the company in a completely different way. She met employees she'd never noticed before, understood processes she'd always considered insignificant, discovered the importance of every person in the complex machinery that made the organization function. Richard became informally her mentor, not in an overt or official way, but through casual conversations, subtle advice, silent examples of how to work with purpose and integrity. He taught her that true leadership doesn't come from hierarchical positions, but from the ability to inspire, serve, and elevate the people around you. He showed her how small acts of consideration and respect could transform the work environment. When Jennifer saw how he treated every employee with dignity and genuine interest, she understood why so many people respected him spontaneously. He remembered the names of the employees' children, asked about health problems, celebrated personal achievements. The company isn't just a business, he explained during one of their conversations. It's a community of people who spend most of their lives here. If we don't take care of each other, what are we but money-making machines? This humanistic philosophy began to deeply influence Jennifer's behavior. She started noticing colleagues who were going through difficulties, offering help without expecting recognition, valuing contributions she had previously considered insignificant. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 6 months after leaving her executive position, Jennifer was working on a file reorganization project when she discovered an old folder that caught her attention. It contained photos from the company's inauguration decades ago. In one of the oldest photos, a young man of approximately 22 years old was cutting an inaugural ribbon, smiling radiantly next to local authorities and employees from that time. Jennifer stared at those young eyes and immediately recognized it was Richard on the day he officially opened the company he had created. The emotion she felt upon seeing that photo was indescribable. It was like visualizing the exact moment when the history of everything around her began, the moment when the dream was born that would become the reality where she now worked. She brought the photo to Richard with tears in her eyes. "I found this today," she said, handing him the photograph. Richard took the photo carefully as if holding something sacred. His eyes filled with nostalgia as he relived that distant moment. "I was so nervous that day," he said, smiling. "I had invested everything I owned in that crazy idea of creating a company that treated employees like family." "And you succeeded," said Jennifer. "Even losing control, even going through all this humiliation that I caused, you never lost the essence of what you created." "Because you don't lose what really matters, Jennifer. Positions may change, titles can be taken away, but purpose and values remain forever." At that moment, Jennifer finally understood the true lesson Richard had tried to teach her, not with words, but with examples, that real greatness comes from how we treat people, especially those we consider inferior or insignificant. A few weeks later, Jonathan announced an administrative restructuring that included creating a new human relations and organizational development department. To everyone's surprise, he offered the department coordination to Jennifer. "You've demonstrated a remarkable personal transformation in recent months," he said during the meeting. "Richard told me you've developed a unique understanding of how to value people and processes. I think you'd be perfect to lead workplace improvement initiatives." Jennifer was moved by the opportunity, but before accepting, she sought out Richard. "He said you talked about me." "We did," confirmed Richard. "I told him you discovered something precious, that the most important work is helping other people find purpose in what they do." "And do you think I should accept?" "I think you should follow your heart. If you feel you can use this position to make a difference in employees' lives, accept. If it's just a way to return to power for power's sake, refuse." Jennifer reflected deeply before making the decision. When she accepted the new position, it was with a completely different philosophy than the one she had previously. Instead of focusing on productivity and profits, she focused on well-being and personal development. She created mentorship programs where experienced employees shared experiences with newer ones. She established communication channels that allowed everyone to be heard, regardless of hierarchy. Richard became a special consultant to the new department, sharing his wisdom on how to create a truly human work environment. Together, they developed initiatives that radically transformed the company culture. One of the most successful projects was a program where employees could dedicate a few hours per week to community projects that benefited their families or communities. The idea had come from Richard, who always believed that a company should contribute to the broader social well-being. "When people feel their work has a positive impact beyond the company walls," he explained, "they find a deeper purpose in everything they do." The program was an absolute success. Employees developed educational projects in their communities, support programs for the elderly, environmental initiatives, vocational courses for at-risk youth. The company began to be recognized not only for its financial results, but for its social responsibility and the quality of life it offered employees. Business management magazines began highlighting the cultural transformation happening within the organization. During one of these journalistic features, Jennifer was interviewed about the implemented changes. When asked about her inspiration, she answered without hesitation, "I learned from someone very wise that true leadership is serving people, not being served by them. That real success is measured by the happiness and growth of the people around us, not just by financial numbers." Although she didn't mention Richard specifically, he read the interview and smiled, proud of the transformation he had witnessed. It wasn't possessive pride, but the satisfaction of having planted seeds that germinated into something beautiful. The relationship between Jennifer and Richard evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. She had stopped seeing him as just a janitor to recognize him for what he truly was: a mentor, a visionary, an example of integrity. 2 years after the iced water incident, the company organized a major celebration for Richard's 45 years with the organization. Jonathan decided it was time to publicly honor his exceptional contribution. During the ceremony, he told all employees the true story of Richard: how he had founded the company, how he had sacrificed his position to save jobs, how he had chosen to keep working out of genuine love for the organization he created. The revelation caused widespread emotion. Many employees were moved to discover they had been working side by side with the creator of everything they knew. Others felt ashamed for having treated Richard merely as just another janitor. Jennifer was invited to speak during the ceremony. With her voice choked with emotion, she said, "2 years ago, I made the gravest mistake of my professional life. I publicly humiliated a man I didn't know, basing my judgment only on superficial appearances. I later discovered I had humiliated not just a dedicated employee, but the very founder of this company." The audience fell into absolute silence. But do you know what was the most incredible part of this story? This man, who had every reason to hate me, chose to teach me. Instead of seeking revenge, he offered wisdom. Instead of holding resentment, he shared compassion. She looked directly at Richard before continuing. "Richard taught me that true greatness isn't about the power we wield over others, but the love we dedicate to what we do. That authentic leadership means inspiring people to be better, not forcing them to obey. That real success is leaving the world a little better than we found it." Tears streamed freely down her face now. "I threw cold water on this man thinking I was protecting our company from an intruder. In reality, I was attacking the very soul of the organization, and he, with his infinite dignity, transformed my cruelty into a learning opportunity." The audience erupted in emotional applause. Many employees were crying, moved by Jennifer's brutal honesty and Richard's greatness of spirit. When it was Richard's turn to speak, he took the stage with his usual humility. His first words were directed at Jennifer. "Jennifer, thank you for having the courage to share that story. I know it wasn't easy to expose your vulnerability like that. But it's exactly this kind of honesty that transforms people and organizations." He turned to the rest of the audience. "For 45 years, I've had the privilege of watching this company grow and evolve. I've seen technological changes, corporate restructurings, different management philosophies, but the most beautiful thing I've witnessed has been the transformation of people. I've seen employees who arrived here young and inexperienced become competent professionals and extraordinary human beings. I've seen leaders who learned that true power comes from empowering others. I've seen a community built on mutual respect and shared purpose." The episode Jennifer mentioned taught me something important: that we're all capable of growing, changing, and becoming better versions of ourselves. The mistake isn't falling down, it's refusing to get up and learn. Richard looked at Jennifer again. "Today, when I look at Jennifer, I don't see the executive who threw cold water on me, but the leader who dedicates her energy to improving her colleagues' lives. I don't see someone who made a mistake, but someone who had the courage to transform that mistake into growth. This company has always been my passion, because it represents something greater than profits and hierarchical positions. It represents the possibility of people coming together to create not just economic value, but human value. And you, each one of you, are living proof that this possibility is real." The speech ended with a 5-minute standing ovation. Employees hugged each other, emotional about being part of something so special. Jennifer and Richard embraced on stage, a hug that symbolized forgiveness, growth, and hope. In the months that followed, the story of Jennifer's transformation and Richard's wisdom spread beyond the company. Other organizations began inviting them to speak about humanized leadership and corporate culture. Whenever they told their story, they emphasized the same message: that superficial judgments can make us miss precious opportunities to learn from extraordinary people, and that true greatness manifests in how we treat those we consider less important. Richard, at 65, finally accepted an official position as senior consultant in organizational culture, not out of need for recognition, but because he could contribute even more effectively to developing humanized leaders. Jennifer, now Director of Human Development, passionately dedicated herself to creating work environments where every person felt valued and respected. Her programs became national references in people management. Together, they developed a reverse mentoring system where executives learned from employees across all hierarchies, recognizing that wisdom and experience aren't limited to positions or diplomas. The company became a case study in business schools, not only for its financial results, but for showing that it's possible to build truly human organizations without sacrificing efficiency or profitability. 3 years after the incident that changed their lives, Jennifer and Richard were working together on a special project, creating a humanized leadership training center that would serve other companies interested in transforming their organizational cultures. During a work break, they talked about how their lives had changed. "Do you regret leaving the executive position?" asked Richard. "Never," Jennifer replied without hesitation. "That position gave me power over people, but it didn't give me life purpose. Now I feel like every day I make a real difference in others' lives." "And I learned something I didn't expect," said Richard. "I learned that sometimes we need to go through humiliation to find our true strength. That cold water reminded me that my worth doesn't depend on others' recognition, but on the love I dedicate to what I do. Thank you for teaching me that leadership is about serving, not being served. And thank you for showing me that people can change deeply when they find the right motivation." They continued working, two human beings who had found in adversity an opportunity for mutual growth. The cruel executive had become a compassionate leader. The humiliated founder had transformed into a respected mentor, and together they were building something bigger than their individual stories. The company Richard had created decades ago was finally fully realizing its original vision, a place where people felt valued, where work had purpose, where leadership meant elevating others. And it all started with a bucket of cold water that, instead of destroying, had planted the seeds of the most beautiful transformation either of them could imagine. At the end of another productive day, as they walked together through the company halls, Jennifer looked at Richard and said, "You know, sometimes I think that cold water was the most important thing that ever happened in my life." "Why?" "Because it showed me who I really was and gave me the opportunity to become who I wanted to be." Richard smiled with that serene wisdom she had learned to admire. "Great transformations almost always begin with great shocks, Jennifer. What matters isn't avoiding mistakes, but learning to turn them into wisdom." They said goodbye at the company door, two friends united by a growth journey that had begun in the most unlikely way possible. And they walked to their homes knowing that the next day they would return to continue building together something truly special. An organization based on respect, purpose, and love for what they do. The cold water had dried long ago, but the lessons it had taught would continue watering lives and transforming destinies for many years to come. End of story. So, what did you think of this story of transformation and overcoming? Did Jennifer manage to find her true purpose after making such a serious mistake? Do you think Richard was right to forgive and teach instead of seeking revenge? Share your honest opinions about this growth journey in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story of second chances and redemption, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this one.